When I was Bataviaria, I would always have some random 8 PM curfew because of having child parents. But for some reason, would always randomly wake up in the middle of the night. Me being me, I would always just screw around playing on either a Game Boy or just trying to watch TV from behind a sofa. So one night, I'm tiptoeing around the house because my unruly ass did not feel like wasting my time sleeping, when I could better spend my time doing cooler stuff. Hint hint, when you're 8, everything is cooler stuff at night. So one night, I peer over the sofa, and it hit me. A golden discovery for me. I was presented to Nami, the funny little anime astronaut. That night, I remember being introduced to a bunch of cartoons. Inuyasha, One Piece, Naruto, and I thought they were freaking awesome. So the next day at school, I gather my friends and tell them tales of believe it, and being so bad with directions you end up in a diet furry anime. But none of them believed me. They thought I was just schizo ranting because none of them had ever been up that late to see it air. Fast forward about a month, and a kid named Jack rolls up, and he has a Sanji book bag. But I noticed something funny. He wasn't eating lollipops like he normally does. I look at it and I'm like, wait a second, he's just smoking. I pointed out his bag was wrong. He said, no it wasn't. This went back and forth until we got to the computer class later in the day. We Googled it, and we were both dumbfounded when we found images of both. See, unbeknownst to my simple-minded child brain, this was my first encounter with localization. The changing of media because someone else decided you cannot consume content the way it is. Now, I'm not one to ever jab at any sort of art. I'm under the banner of fully free expression. If anything, if something needs to be censored for cultural reasons, I'm under the idea it simply doesn't belong where you're trying to send it. So, for this video, localizers are going to be catching some strays. So for those of you that don't know, a localizer is a person who has to adapt a piece of media for consumption in a new region, without breaking the immersion. Unfortunately for us, the anime wizards of Japan can only speak in funny little room houses, so we're dependent on groups of acolytes known as translators, to turn their funny little drawings into something we can understand. We use both localizer and translator interchangeably, but this isn't entirely accurate. A translator uses the ponder orb and turns this funny little kanji into the word wine. This is now understandable for English speakers. In America, this is fine, but in Australia, say you had a game rated for E10+, it can't be sold with alcoholic references. So that's where the localizer comes in. It happens all the time, you just don't notice when it happens. In fact, if you did notice, then your localizer did a bad job. But when you have a job this rife for misuse, sure enough, someone will come down the line and misuse that power. There are some out there that will uptake the job of localizing anime, but do the bare minimum in order to get it localized. Translators give the localizer a rough script. Rather than just giving what is required to make it make sense, some take it upon themselves to just begin editing the source work, sometimes without the consent of the original artist. A little while back, there was some controversy with this one manga named I Think I Turned My Childhood Friend Into a Girl. Cringe name, I know. The rundown on the story is about two friends. One of them happens to like cosmetics and just looking pretty. So, they give the main love interest a makeover. That's it. Keep in mind, the character throughout the original fully maintained they were male, but the localizer decided it would be more appropriate for them to be trans. So they even went as far as to remove words from a panel where they fully assert they were male. This led to a whole spiel where the company responsible, 7 Seas, gave their 200th corporate apology for the mistranslation. And no, that was their own words, mistranslation. Because this reached the guys who own the rights to the manga, and the company was forced to make reprints. Going this far to change the original is like when you're scrolling on Twitter and see people fixing art. It implies the original was bad or problematic and needed me to change it, because according to the localizer, a gay relationship with a femboy isn't something that can happen. Way to go. But what makes it the worst is the absolute disdain for the media when they make these sorts of changes. Because it's not as if they were ever good faith in the first place. Writing in your politics was never the intent of the original author for plenty of these works, and they know damn well it wasn't. But framing this into context, it starts to make sense as to why it attracts so many of these types. See, when you're a localizer, your job, as proven by 7 Seas' constant screw-ups, has little to no oversight. So why wouldn't this attract someone who wants to LARP as a Reddit mod? Everything has to go through you, and neither side can tell what's happening on the other end. Tell me, who is there to complain? Most of the time we catch this, it ends up being when it's blatantly obvious. When it goes from breaking immersion to downright preaching at me. Or when you throw in new age slang like no cap or yeet. Think, if it wasn't for the English fan translation, how would anyone have known the dialogue was changed? Who would have searched for something like this? But localizers in the sense poise themselves almost as if they're the gatekeepers of anime, as if anime would not have exploded as an industry in the West without them, as if y'all weren't straw hats since before Crunchyroll. A little while back, we had some controversy going on with a localizer named Katrina over her anime localization of Onimai. The important part here is one of her responses to the backlash for the bad localization. If you don't like the localization, you weren't the target audience. So let me get this straight. The people who would watch it in subs are not the target audience for the English release. Your job as the localizer is to adapt the English script to me. The entire reason you were hired was because someone needed to get it from one country to the other. I don't know about you, but that sounds like the entire reason for your existence was specifically to target the same audience. In fact, I'd argue if you target two different audiences with the same piece of media, then you as the localizer did not do your job. In my eyes, this is all hypocritical in nature. If something isn't valid for an overseas audience, why do you think localizing it to that degree makes it acceptable? Just think for a second. Let's say something like One Piece is transphobic because Oda decided this character is female but isn't trans. And let's say for a second I would agree with you. Why do you believe changing this isn't still to some degree still in support of the original? The overwhelming majority of the sales dollars still go to the IP holder. So would you rather I support something transphobic and not know about it, when I can make the active choice to not consume something transphobic? If anything, you've only told shareholders to vote for them to make more transphobic content because the green line went up. To be clear, I'm not opposed to inserting outside influence or political messaging into anime provided the original artist intended it. I'm still very much against Bandai going directly against the writers of The Witch of Mercury, who very much intended for the characters to be gay. My problem is when the art is used as a vehicle to push a worldview without consent. You can't see things the way the artist intended, whether that be fanservice or content, because someone else pre-decided it's not good for me. Because someone who doesn't know I exist somehow knows what's best for me. But we know why they just piggyback off of someone else, because the last time they tried, we ended up with High Guardian Spice.